You're listening to episode 559 of the Father Bills podcast. Welcome back. This week's episode is entitled, Who is Your Neighbor? Given on the 15th Sunday in Ordinary Time, 2016. The cards that you have in the pew before we begin Mass has the prayer for the year of mercy. And if you look at that, you might notice there's a logo attached to that. If you have it in the pews, take a look at it, because it's a figure with another figure around the shoulders. It's Jesus in the image of a shepherd with a person around his neck as if a sheep. This also brings back the image of this particular parable where the Samaritan took care of the person that was robbed. We are called then to be like Jesus, people of mercy. Well, once there was a priest who was speeding to his parish from the rectory or from another activity, and he was pondering on many things. This was his last day at the parish. And he was beginning a new assignment the next day. He was also worrying about the homily that was coming in the next week, and he wanted to make a good impression with his new parish. At the same time, he was thinking about the last duty that he had to perform, which was to hire a new business manager. And he was on his way to the church to do the interview for the candidate that was coming up next. So he called the office and had an extended conversation with the secretary about things that needed to be done in preparation for this interview and many other things. As the priest was dodging through traffic on his way to the church, he noticed a car on the side of the road with its hood up and a man clearly struggling with his what appeared a malfunctioning cell phone. As the priest approached, he thought to himself, well, maybe I can help him, but then again, I don't really have time. I have to get to this meeting. And so he decided, I'll keep going. Then he said to himself, wait a second, maybe if I just loan them my phone, they could do a quick phone call. But that'll take time, and actually maybe he'll steal my phone. Maybe it's actually a big ruse, and he'll rob me. So he continued and sped right by the guy. Eventually, getting to the parish, parking in his parking spot. As he arrived, he came and set up the room for the interview. Well, the person was late. In fact, the person didn't even show that day. The priest was pretty mad for not, having this person show up. After all, he did get to the parish and bypass somebody in need and was concerned about all these other things. And the person didn't have the decency to call and tell him that he wouldn't show up. Well, ultimately, the interview never happened. So the next day occurred, and the interviewee shows up. The candidate shows up to the office. Remember, the pastor is now gone and on to another parish. So the man decided he would tell the secretary there that why he wasn't able to make it there, that he had car trouble and was stranded on the roadside. And he kept trying to call the office with his cell phone, but no one would answer because it was always busy. And then finally he saw Father speeding right by him without stopping. The man concluded with his comments by explaining that with such a poor sense of service and hospitality, he didn't want to work for the church of the Good Samaritan, the parish, the Good Samaritan. So it's ironic, this story that I made up is entitled The Good Samaritan, the parish. Well, we are St. Anne. The question is, okay, what are we called to do? We have a mission. We are a welcoming parish. We are called to proclaim Christ's mission to people, to whoever who comes. That is who we are to be. Do we do it? Are we those persons? And so while this is a cautionary tale that I offered, it's a question for us. How does our life symbolize or reflect the story also that Jesus told about the Good Samaritan? It's as powerful today as it was back then. Keep in mind, Samaritans were considered half-breeds, and the Jews would only associate with their own kind. Do you associate only with your kind? Do you affiliate with only people of your political affiliation? Do you interchange with people of other faiths? Do you actually get along and talk to your neighbors? Well, the question that was laid before Jesus by this lawyer was, who was my neighbor? Who is my neighbor? Did you notice that Jesus doesn't even answer the question, but rather gives a story? And in the story, he responds basically that we are called to be neighbors. And instead of looking for somebody else to fill our whatever box that needs to be filled out so we can be with them, he's calling us to be that person. So after he asked that question, how am I to have eternal life? A second question was really intended to justify himself so that he could myopically decide who it would be in and who would be out. He wanted to know who he was to love and who he was not to love, who he was to associate with and who he was not to associate with. And in one sense, that would be akin to a lot of the time. But this is where Jesus blows the doors off. Instead of answering the question, he tells them basically, you are to be a neighbor to everyone. And we in our time and day have this in spades. With the technology before us, think about it. With the technology before us, we can communicate instantly across vast distances. You can even see images of the International Space Station going overhead, right? You can see live on your TV, if you have an internet device, what's going on in Rome or in Moscow or many other places in the world. We have instant communication. And what does it do? Minimally, it draws us into one community, that we are all in one place. And you hear this from astronauts all the time. People have gone up into space, and they look back onto the globe, and their hearts are changed because they don't see boundaries. They don't see political boundaries. They don't see, our ideologies. They see the globe, and they see how we're all connected. Imagine that perspective. Sometimes people come to me and they ask, gosh, I'm struggling with patience. And my response to them, and it's to myself as well, have perspective. Pray for perspective. Because when we don't have perspective, we start to glue in and focus in on parochial thinking, thinking of just people that it's only us versus them. So let us not be like that lawyer. Instead, let us then try to live as Jesus has told us. And it's hard because with all the political, racial, and economic and interpersonal connection and disconnection and tension in our world today, it becomes a common tactic for some to just find simple solutions, justifying one's own ideology or position while throwing everybody else out. This is very common in threads on the internet, whether it be Facebook or other social media. In my quest to try to proclaim the gospel, I get people that quickly want answers that are simplistic and dividing. I'm like, but the church is so much more full than what you're saying. And of course, then I get bashed all the more. But that's the way it is. I take it on, and that's my cross. Maybe it's yours, but I beg you, if you're on social media, be mindful of how you speak and what you say. Are you building bridges? Or are you dividing people? And so while we may not individually be able to bring peace between nations that are warring or at tension, we certainly can be agents of peace with the people around us. Are you struggling with forgiveness? Well, that's a supernatural thing. So ask God. Give up on your side trying to forgive somebody. Ask God into your heart so that you may forgive. It's very likely the people that you have a grudge against don't even know it, right? And here you are walking around with all that stuff, all that darkness, and nobody knows. And all is it going to do? What is it going to do? It's going to eat you from the inside out. Give it up. Give it to God. Let him heal it. And watch what happens. So we want change. And I would encourage us to be change. Be changed, in fact. We come here to Mass for that very reason. We come here with our sins and our struggles and the things that are weighing us down, the stresses and the sorrows. And we receive the Lord Jesus in the Eucharist, where the music lifts us up and the Scriptures proclaims his word. All these things are intended so that we go out to then share this good news with others. Think about it this way. God created us, and he knows us fully, and yet we still are here. How many people have you wanted to check mark a box off and say, this person should be gone, and that person should be gone. And okay, I'm the only one? I don't think so. But I'm so glad that I'm not God, because that's not how God works. The fact that we are here is evidence that his vision of things and his perspective is eternal. He is always waiting for us to turn toward him at every moment. And this is why that's why the church has such a pro-life stand, from womb to tomb. From even a person that has committed a heinous crime, we would prefer that they be held secure, maybe incarcerated, for the hope of conversion in their heart. Each one of us then, according to Jesus, are to be a neighbor. And that means not just your next door neighbor, but know that we are to be loving neighbors to everyone around us. Now, keep in mind, get in your car today, and as you drive out the driveway here, how do you be a neighbor? Think about it. The onus is not on others, it's on us. We're the ones that need to change. Some of us also, I know, struggle when driving around just, here in town or on the freeway. How can you be different on the freeway or on the roads where someone's being a real jerk, right? There's lots of jerks out there. My thought would be, you don't be one. Start with that, because you can't change them, but you can certainly change you. You can say, you know what? I'm going to let that person go. And if they're being really snarky, then just pull over somewhere, let them go on, and wish them well, then get back on the road. Don't encourage any road rage. That's actually being a good steward for somebody who's out of control. Don't add to the problem. So each one of us then struggle with this, because we're also living in a world of a quid pro quo attitude. Quid pro quo, this for that. I will do this if you do that. And I'm like, wait a second, is that loving? Love is free. Love just does, not because of consequences that will bring back love to you. Think of Jesus. I mean, we got this big image of the cross. He didn't do that for himself. He did it totally for us. He wants to be with us, and he did the ultimate for us. So remember this Samaritan. When he walked up to the person, remember, the Samaritan is a half-breed, a reject from the culture of the Jews. This person that was robbed was a Jew. The Samaritan was moved with compassion. The word compassion means to suffer with. Would you suffer with someone? I'll bet you each one of us knows somebody who's struggling right now, who needs help, who needs the care. Maybe this would be homework. Go see them. Make a phone call. Say, how are you? Even if they're far away, post something on their Facebook page or whatever, Twitter or whatever it might be. Make a connection. We're called, as our Holy Father has encouraged us, to walk with people through mercy, walk with them with compassion, suffer with them. And don't do it for accolades. Do it because you care. And don't do it just because I said there's homework, and we're not going to be grading you, by the way. But do it because you also are a person of compassion, that you've heard this story, that you want to be a good Samaritan. We need people to give of their hearts. But some people, many people, have doubts, fears, selfishness, anger, political ideology, or greed, or even self-loathing, such that they will never put themselves in a place to help another because of these things. Is that your reason for not helping? If it is, send that to prayer. Ask the Lord to heal that, because you may just be the wounded healer that another wounded person needs. Take this story to heart. Next time you see someone truly in need, instead of justifying yourself, reach out and walk with them. Be a companion with them. Pray for them. Maybe take your wealth, your skill, your love, and whatever talent you might have and put it to good use. Give it away. You're not taking it with you. Just yesterday, I was going to come over here after the Spanish Mass, but I got an emergency phone call. That day, there was a couple, and the husband had a major heart attack. And by the time I got to the hospital, he was fully intubated and had been given a diagnosis that he would not last long. And talking to the wife, you can imagine how difficult this is. They woke up that day as any other day, but this would be the last day for him. If you knew that was the case today, that this was your last day, how would you behave? Would you be finally that good Samaritan, that loving neighbor that you're called to be? Or will you hold it against a person? No matter right or wrong of another person's doing, we can always treat them with the dignity that they are due as a human being. And in fact, even then, especially when they're doing such great wrong, or whatever it is the difficulty might be, you're showing a kindness and a charity to them, maybe a confrontation to the stuff that's going on in them. You might baffle them. You might make them wonder what's going on, because I thought we're enemies. And here you walk right up to them, and you did something good. At the end of the day, you can look back and say, you know what? I made a potential change for some good. But you don't know. We have no idea how it'll change a person's life. Regardless, if done with love, it will certainly change yours. Thank you again for listening to this episode of the Father Bills Podcast. As we look back on this week, there's been so much tragedy in our nation. I think we need to pray particularly for the ending of violence, and violence not just in our streets, but also violence in our hearts. For these things seem to propel either repeat or copycats, or it drums up in our desires of our hearts the desire for revenge or whatever it is, and we need not do that. Being good Samaritans, being Christians that we are called to be, we need to be praying for peace and helping to solve problems, whether they be racism or whatever it might be. And so our hearts go out to all those who have been killed in the last several weeks because of the injustices and the violence that people perpetrate on others, but also within our own hearts, and that we may be changed, that we may be agents as good Samaritans of love and calming and help. And I ask that you pray for that. That'd be great homework on top of all this homily to consider that. Now, as always, you can get a hold of me in many different ways if you have any questions or comments, but instead of giving you all the different outlets, I want to just give you pretty much one. But I do want to let you know that I just did add 2 extras, and that is now SoundCloud and YouTube. So those are added to my social connection links. And if you just go to my webpage, if you want to get a hold of me, go to fatherbill.org, FRBILL.org. And there you can email me and do all the other different social media connection points for me, and I'd be happy to respond. Those of you who have, I want to thank you, and I respond as quickly as I can. Sometimes within the hour, sometimes in the day, maybe a couple of days. But I've always responded, even to people who are across the world. And I will certainly pray if you have any requests. And until next time, may God bless you, and have a great week. Bye-bye.